In the track view introduction, we very briefly saw some of the other display tools and windows that are part of the Skylight interface. So let's take a closer look at them. First, the inspector. This is shown by pressing I, and it can be docked to either side of the track view or floated. It has a narrow view or a wider one. Just click drag on the right-hand edge of the window. In wide view, there is an options menu available with choices to dock it at the left, the right, undock or collapse it. In narrow view, it can be click dragged into position and collapsed if docked, or shown or hidden if floating by pressing I. In narrow view, it shows the current in-focus track or bus as a channel strip, similar to that found on a console or mixing desk. These controls are duplicates of those found in the track or bus header we looked at earlier, and changes made in one are reflected in the other. The exact controls will vary depending on whether it's displaying an audio, a MIDI track, or a bus. It looks very similar to the view of the tracks and buses that we'll see in the console view, and we'll look at the controls in more detail there when we get to mixing. We'll also see the inspector in various other videos, such as when we look at MIDI instruments and simple instrument tracks. The inspector follows the current in-focus track, unless it is locked, which can be done by left-clicking on the track name in the inspector view and select that choice from the menu. There are also several display options available from the display menu at the bottom of the inspector. Here we can set which modules are displayed in the inspector, as well as option settings including how many sends to show, the EQ plot resolution, and various display and behaviour choices for the meters. We'll look at metering in more detail when we start to record. When in wide view, the right-hand strip display depends on the track or bus in focus. If an audio track has focus, it's the downstream bus, or a send if a send is the current selected module in the left-hand strip. If a MIDI track has focus, it displays various MIDI controls such as the patch browser, snap to scale and quantize settings. If it's a simple instrument track, there are two tabs at the bottom. One of them displays the audio downstream bus, similar to an audio track, the other the MIDI controls, similar to a MIDI track. If a bus has focus, the right-hand strip displays the downstream bus or output if the output is set to a main out. There are also two tabs at the top that reveal the clip and track inspectors. Both these inspectors show options and parameters relating to those. We'll look at those in more details as we progress through the program. The browser is a convenient way of finding and loading the various elements that make up a project, including media clips, effects and instruments. It can be moved, docked, floated or collapsed, similar to the inspector. Unlike the inspector though, it can be dragged into the multi-dock, which we'll look at shortly. There are three main tabs along the top that divide it into its three main uses: the media browser, the plugin browser and the synth rack. From the media browser, we can locate and then drag and drop clips into the clip pane. There are location presets to make navigation easy, and is also access to the full folder and file tree from the menu. It's possible to create your own presets by navigating to the required folder and then clicking on the Save button. The selected clip can be previewed, either automatically by selecting the relevant options from the menu, or manually by clicking on the play icon toward the top right. The output needs to be assigned correctly to hear the preview. Audio needs to be assigned to a bus or output, while MIDI needs to be assigned to a soft synth. We'll look at inserting soft synth shortly. The search filter can be used to narrow searches down. For example, type the word drum into the filter and only clips with drum in the title are displayed. The plugin tab is further subdivided into categories: audio effects, MIDI effects, instruments or soft synths, and finally rewire devices. All of these can also be drag-dropped into projects. If you try and drag any element into an inappropriate place, the cursor will indicate that, and dropping it there will have no effect. For example, you can't drag an audio effect into a MIDI track. The Synth Rag tab displays any synths that are inserted in a project. The next is the multi-dock. This is a container for holding multiple windows. When empty, it's collapsed, and to open it, we just need to either drag and drop a window on it or open one of Music Creator 6's views. This opens the dock, which by default is at the bottom. Initially, the multi-dock opens as a relatively small window, but it can be maximised by pressing Shift+D or dragged to an appropriate size. Restore it back again by pressing Shift+D again. The window can be dragged to any height you like and collapsed by pressing D. Opening another view opens it into its own tab within the multi-dock, and swapping between them is as simple as clicking on the relevant tab or pressing Ctrl plus Shift plus the left or right cursor key. Just about any window can be dropped into the multi-dock, including effects interfaces, the browser and synths. Just like the browser and inspector, the multi-dock can also be repositioned, either at the bottom or top of the display, and it can also be floated, either by choosing it from the menu or click dragging it into position. Notice that the cursor position in relation to the screen edge controls how wide the multi-dock is and where it is positioned when it's docked. The blue rectangle indicates it's about to dock and the exact location. If at any time you don't want it to dock, just hold down the Control key before releasing the mouse. These two techniques, both cursor positioning and stopping the dock with the Control key, also apply to the inspector, browser, and the next handy display tool we're going to look at, the control bar. This is shown or hidden by pressing C. It contains icons for access to various commands for use throughout the program. We'll be using this as we work through it. It can be docked at the top or bottom and floated. Either right-click on an empty portion or drag and drop as required. Another very useful tool is the HUD. Think of this as a toolbox that can be shown at any time by either pressing the middle mouse button or pressing T. It then appears at the cursor position, making tool selection, edit filter state and note duration selection quick and easy. We'll see this in use in later videos. These key presses, I for the inspector, B for the browser, C for the control bar, D to show and hide the multi-dock, Shift+D to maximise and restore it, T or middle mouse for the HUD, make using the interface fast and simple. Now let's take a very brief look at some of the other views.